Hello and welcome to Roll for Insight, our cosy Q&A with all things tabletop. Today we're welcoming Senna and Vicky. Give us a wave. Thank you. And we're talking It's What My Character Would Do, how to play a character with an alignment that's opposed to the rest of the party. Generally, I think we can agree that on the whole, most parties are good aligned in some respect, or at least the goal of the party is usually good aligned, saving the day, saving the world in some way. Although that's not always the case. And so it can be difficult when you're trying to play a character that's of a different alignment, that's directly opposed. Neutral's okay, but if you're playing evil in a good aligned party with good aligned goals, how it can be really fun, but it can be tricky. How do you work around the fact that you're possibly actively opposing the aim of the party? How do you play that without completely destroying the DM's plans, completely destroying the game for everybody else, treading on everybody else's toes? How can you get that delicate balance, that weave, that integration, so that all the characters can play together? Because at the end of the day, this is a game that we're all playing to have a good time. And it can very much become not a good time if you feel that somebody is opposing you or trying to undermine what you're trying to do in not a very fun way. So, Senna and Vicky, what are your thoughts on this tricky situation?
Well, I personally think that if you're going to be playing a character that is opposed to the party's, alignments, I think first off, a good understanding with your DM and perhaps with your party as well. I think it would be very interesting to know from both the person that wants to do the opposite alignment as well as the people who are going to be playing the regular alignment, to at least have an idea of like, hey, this is what I want to do. Because I think you can do it really, really well, and it can spice things up, make it a bit more interesting. But if, of course, you don't have that proper session zero discussion, it's going to lead to quite a bit of conflict.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say that you 100% need to have, like, at the very least, a conversation with your DM, and you've got to have an understanding as to why your character's there in the first place. Like, if your party are doing something like saving the world or going after someone that you actually agree with, then you need to think about why you'd be with them. Because at the end of the day, if you're like, you can't use the "that's what my character would do" excuse if what your character would do would not be with that group of people, because they are actively going against what you want to do. At that point, I think it comes to there was a guy in one of the campaigns in Crit Happens that played an evilly aligned paladin with a group of good players, of good aligned characters, but he made sure that he had reasons for going into that, and he was very, very upfront and open with why he was doing what he was doing with the group and the DM. But I do think that actually it can work really well to have an evilly aligned party member in your group. It can add some really interesting, like, philosophical RP discussions and some really interesting character development and character growth from both ends. It doesn't have to be one-sided, and it can lead to some very, very good in a group conflict. But you have all got to be of that understanding. I think that's the most kind of important part of it. Because otherwise it's not fun.
Yeah, exactly. I think if you don't have good understanding between what each side would want, you're not going to be having a great time. But on the other hand, if you do understand that straight from the start, I think it could make for some indeed very interesting character growth, and also perhaps because you have a evil aligned character that then opens the door to solving certain situations that otherwise wouldn't be able to be solved that way, because you're not going to have a character that has a good alignment. Obviously, it's not going to have the same connections as someone that is more evil aligned. And I think in that way it could also be interesting. And then also just it will give you some really nice RP moments where you will have those opposing sides standing up against each other of, no, this is what we want to do. I do think it's also important that from both sides, I think just flat out saying, oh, this is what my character would do, it's sometimes a bit of a cop-out. I think at the end of the day, you are going to play your character the way that character would be played, but I do think it's also important to still play a little bit along with the group as well. Obviously, if one of the characters has a very strong connection to a person, you can't just, knock that person out of the game, that strong connection to one of the good players, because, well, that's what my character would do. I think there are some lines between just what my character would do and, just doing it as well.
Yeah, just being a dick.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I would agree with that. There was a campaign I was in person where we had a variety of different players we hadn't met before the campaign started. We had a variety of different players that all liked different ways of playing, which is fine. And one of the players was playing this fighter. Very OP fighter, I will say. Like he'd managed to maximize and optimize quite successfully, but his character was constantly doing things that were quite selfish and were actively, like, particularly with my character, who was very sort of all about balance and goodness and the balance of nature, because I was a druid. Like he was actively sometimes doing things that were putting my character out, and I tried to start, because I was like, this is great, because this means that we could have some particularly interesting conversations. This is great RP, except he didn't like RP, so he didn't. And every time I tried to engage him in it, he would just say, my character walks away. And I was like, well, this sucks, because all that's happening is that I'm getting put into a massive, like, existential crisis every week. It's not fun. This is actually quite exhausting, and I don't think it's leading anywhere. Like, it's not going anywhere unless we start going into PvP, which was something that I didn't want to engage in. And when I tried to talk to the DM about it, the DM's response was basically, "Oh, he's like the Hound from Game of Thrones, And I'm like, well, that's great, but there's a reason why the Hound is always alone." I said, unless he's willing to change, or unless he's willing to do something, this is going to cause friction. And I think in the end, I just ended up saying, look, I can't play this character. I need a break from my character, because it's every week and I'm exhausted. And so I ended up just playing a character that wouldn't give two shits about what happened. But it was that I felt that was it was making the game less enjoyable. From my perspective, because I didn't think it was culminating in anything poignant or anything worthwhile. It was just a constant back and forth that wasn't leading to anything beyond me just getting pissed as a player, not as a character. So yeah, that was a bad instance of that's what my character would do. Because I'm sure it's what he would do, but then at some point we would just kick him from the group because he's not doing anything useful.
Yeah, and I think that's already gone past the point of just using that's what my character would do as a bit of a cop out, because I think there very much is a line that needs to be drawn when another player is starting to not enjoy the game because of a different aligned character. I think that line would have been crossed there, and it's a shame that they would not want to engage, because I think that's the strong suits of playing an opposing aligned character, where you can have that very interesting RP, because just combat wise, etc., usually a good and evil character will play the same. The only difference would be in flavor of spells, etc. But I think it's where RP is where the strong suit is. So if you are going to be met with an opposing character, then I think the RP there should be very important. It's otherwise there isn't much of a point of playing a character that is opposed to the group's alignment.
I do think though that there are. Oh, sorry.
I think meta's really important. If you're going to play a character, it might even be that they're a good aligned character, but they're just an arsehole. I think that communication between people is really important, and understanding the relationships between the characters, but also your relationship with other people at the table. It is a game. It's not real, but the people who play it are real. And, I don't think it's wrong that we get invested in our characters and we care about what happens to our characters in the context of that game. When you're in that zone for 4 hours, you care what happens to your character. You can walk away after it and forget about it for a week. But yeah, I think it's not enjoyable for other people if you don't communicate. And I think if you're going to have a moment of, this is what my character would do, and it's going to potentially cause upset either for other characters or even for their players, I think that you maybe need to just address that before you do it and say, look, my character's probably going to have a go at yours now, but it's because that's what they do, and here's the context around it, and that's what they would do. But are you comfortable with that? Are you comfortable with my thief pickpocketing something from your character when they're not looking, that sort of thing? And you have to understand the relationship. I recently DM'd a campaign, and the characters, I don't think anyone was overtly evil aligned necessarily. Certainly there was some neutral alignments in there, but the characters kind of formed this weird bond between them where they all kind of hated each other. They would play pranks on each other, they would make snidey comments at each other, but you knew there was this general sense that under the surface, when it really came to it, they would die for each other. Like, it was that kind of playful PvP. But you need to be able to read the room and have that emotional intelligence, I think, to figure out when something might be a problem or when it would be generally accepted.
Yeah, I think you've just got to realize that your action, even in this game, your actions have consequences, and if you're going to be an arsehole, you have to be aware, you've got to be accepting of those consequences, whether that's just because you are just a generally combative character, as I say, not even necessarily evilly aligned, just a combative character. You've got to be ready to be called out for that by the other characters in the game. Like, you just have to, because ultimately these are people that are putting their lives in your hands in the context of a fantasy setting. And if they can't trust you, then why would they bother with having you around? If they are willing to protect you, but that's not the same vice versa, then in any, even a real life scenario, you would be ostracized and segregated and chucked out if they don't feel like you are someone that they can trust with their life. And that comes under a lot of different things. There's only so far that desperation and end of the world antics will kind of get you until you realize, shit, I need to change. And it might be actually that culmination of that character gets to that point where the rest of the party are going, if you don't do something, dude, this is it. And it might be that's the kick up the arse that your character then needed to be like self-reflective and be thinking, oh shit, no, I am doing something awful. This is bad. I need to do something. And it might be that your character is just that far gone that they need that moment. Which, if that's the case, that's amazing character growth for you as a player, and that's something so interesting to have to work through as a player and a character as well. But again, it's all got to be communicated. Like, even if it's after the fact, I'm really sorry I did that. That wasn't my intention. Like, this is what I'm aiming to do. Because let's face it, only really the DM roughly knows what's going to happen, and even then they're not always 100% sure. So there may not even be a heads up about something. Like, if a decision comes up and the evil character it does something that they know the rest of the party will absolutely despise, then it's important to have a conversation afterwards, being like, I'm so sorry. These are the reasons why I did it. Like, how much do you want to know? I'll tell you as much as I feel I can at this point. And then have that open dialogue to make sure that they are 100% on the money with why you're doing what you're doing. Rather than just saying, that's what my character would do, and then just like shrugging it off.
I agree to a degree with that because, well, of course there is it's important to then have a conversation afterwards, like saying, hey, there might be a reason why I'm doing this. Perhaps it could also be interesting to keep a part of that reason behind. Just, maybe talk with your DM about it, like, I want to go do this, and that's why I want to do something. But there is also just going to be those moments, like you said, where something just comes up and you just see that as that's putting myself in the position of playing the opposite aligned character. There is going to be moments where you just see a moment and you say, okay, now this is the moment where I can do something that's what is going to be interesting. I do very much agree that you're going to have to be okay with getting a little bit of backlash for that. But I think it's also important that it gets kept between those characters. And I do think that an afterwards conversation about that is then important, but it could also very much be that you don't want to tell the entire thing of, this is why I'm doing all of this. But it's important that you do tell the other players, like, I'm not planning on taking anyone out of actually playing your characters. I just want to make a bit of a more interesting story for my character, which may not exactly be fully aligned with what you want to do.
Yeah, I think that is important. Yeah, and I think as well, like it's dependent on the player, because I know, so like Kate and I in Echoes, because Julius and Flopsy have had quite a tumultuous relationship. There have been a number of times where she's messaged me afterwards and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I know and she's asked me how much do I want to know, and I've just said how much you're willing to tell me. Just tell me what you want to tell me." And so she'll give me as much as she wants, because she knows that when I go back into the game, I won't necessarily meta that, and I'm just going to continue playing like Flopsy would play. And so I think it's dependent on the players that you're talking to as well. If you know that there's someone that won't be able to extricate what they know as a player and what their character knows, I think that's also a little bit of an issue. So like with Cadmus in Strahd 2, like that one is, he is a dick, as Sam very, very politely put after getting the sending the other day. But he is a dick. But like I've made sure to let all the players know in advance that I am going to be an asshole, and if like feel free to have a go at him. Like absolutely cool with that. And they've gone, oh okay, and definitely Orion has 100%. So it's that communication. I think that ultimately it always comes down to communication and being effectively communicative with either the players and or the DM. It's entirely up to you how you want to kind of like communicate that.
I think as well that you don't, if you're playing, say, an evil-lined character in a party of generally good, you don't have to go the full whack. You don't have to be chaotic evil and just want to watch the world burn for random reasons. I think that if you're creative enough, you can certainly make an evil aligned character with motivations that maybe mean that for the time being at least they're walking the same path as the party. Perhaps you're an acolyte of Tiamat and you're just there to gather as much wealth and treasure as you can, with the goal of bringing her back eventually. And if you keep these idiots with you alive long enough, then they'll help you get into places with treasure and stuff. And I think if you have a focused goal, rather than just I'm going to fireball everything because it's evil fun, then that can work really, really well. And you can get some really valuable RP out of that. between characters about, you know, their alignments, their various, maybe the gods they worship or the forces they follow, that sort of thing. There's some real creativity to be had there.
Yeah, but I think what you say there as well is I think the goal of your character in that campaign setting is very important, because it may very well be that, especially for an evil aligned character, that with that character you're not necessarily planning or aiming to completely be at the end of that campaign setting, but just maybe you want to be able to get to a certain point in that campaign setting with an evil aligned character where you're just happen to be with this good aligned character, with these good aligned other players, to just get to your goal. And I think that also then opens the door for some interesting RP or possibly twists in the story that you could talk about with your DM, like, hey, this maybe you could get my character in sort of part of being part of the end game, or part of the big bad where they split off of the party at a certain point. I think that's also very important, that you from the start, especially with an opposing aligned character, that you from the start have an idea of where do I want to get with this character.
And it's really important to keep those conversations going as well. I mean, even with good aligned characters, to be quite honest, with any character, you should be having those conversations with your DM about, like, so this is kind of like what they're thinking about at the moment. I know I've always had conversations with the DM for Flopsy where I'll say this is how they're feeling about the situation right now. They don't necessarily want to do this, but this would be the kind of the sort of situation that would have to occur in order for them to go down that route. So then it means that the DM can put you into a position where that might be a decision and you have to make that choice. Like, you should just be doing that with your DM regardless of what alignment you have as a character. But I will say, like, has anyone seen like campaign 3 of Critical Role? Some of it, the beginning section. So they go to I can't remember the name of it, but they go to a place, and a character played by Erika Ishii joins the group, and it's all very lovely and wonderful. And it turns out, spoilers, it turns out that about maybe 3 or 4 episodes down the line, she's actively working against them, actually, as this undercover shapeshifter changeling person, and they end up having this like PvP battle. And like, whilst that may not necessarily be a great way to kind of go long term, because if the battle happens sooner than you thought, then that one player's got a little bit of a problem because now they're like ostracized from the group. But if you have like a smaller like set of players that are only going to be there for a certain length of time, if it's a shorter campaign, like a few episodes, a few sessions, or if it's like a character that's only going to be there for so long because the player can only be there for X, Y, and Z, then that's also particularly like a really good dynamic that you can have as well. That sort of that player that's actively pretending to be with the group but actually undermining them at every turn, and everyone's there going, "Why is this not working?" And then like you have that sort of like that PvP battle at the end, and as long as the player and the DM are fully aware of that's what's going to happen, I think that can also act as a really good sort of party moment as well, particularly for the rest of them who then have to live with the knowledge that they just had like a betrayer in their midst. How is that then going to like impact them later on down the line as well? So that could also be something that would be an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, but I think that also then gives the opportunity for some really nice RP and even growth moment for the Good Line party, where they did have that betrayer in their midst. Because the way I see it, at least, is if you play D&D with your characters, for as much as possible, you are going to try and play them in a way that they feel like real people.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it is very interesting to be able to say, like, you know, how would this person, if they were real, actually deal with learning that someone they saw as an ally or a friend, all of a sudden, apparently having been backstabbing him the entire time, having been sabotaging them at every turn that they were possible, and now possibly even a former ally that they in this PvP battle would have had to even try and take down, or even actually take down. I think that gives some really nice RP moments as well. But again, then I think it's important for that. Well, like you said, it's important for every character, but I think it's important that you then know where would I want this character to end, or where would I want to take this character. But what I am keen to hear is if you would be playing a character that's, you're acting like you are just part of this good aligned group, where you are acting as if you are actively helping them out, would you straight from the start want to tell them like, hey, my character isn't really helping, or would you want to keep that as a bit of a plot twist, which maybe goes against what I talked about earlier?
I think in that one instance, in the instance where you know that this is only going to be a one-off, where the character is going to come and go, I think that's probably the one instance where, as long as you've got that open communication with the DM, and the DM and you are on that same page, I think the surprise for the players is equally as important as the surprise for the characters. And that, because in that moment you're not, the aim isn't to necessarily stick with the party. The aim is to sow discord. That is the point of it. The intention isn't to then, drop a bomb in the middle of the group and then stay with them. Like that's not the intention behind that one. Like, the intent is, I'm gonna do some fucking shit and then I'm gonna leave. And that, I think so in that moment, it's probably more suitable for you to keep that secret. And it's actually also quite interesting for the players as well, because I can guarantee there's always going to be that one player that's giving you side eye thinking the entire way through, and like giving them a bit of a brain challenge to try and figure out, like, are they is always going to be quite interesting as well.
Yeah, I think I think that it could even be that if you're playing a longer term campaign, perhaps your character, and again, as a player, I wouldn't want to know if somebody else in the party was actively sabotaging us and stuff. I feel like half the fun is working that out as a player as well. But it may be that you work with the DM to come to a point where, you start off by sabotaging and being a mole and all of those sort of things, but then there comes a turning point, and perhaps either when you're discovered or you confess that your character has reached a point in the story where they're like, actually, yeah, I was being a dickhead and I was messing you guys up, but I can kind of see why you're on the path you're on, and actually I'd quite like to continue to follow you on that path, like aligned. Not necessarily, they don't have to suddenly become good, but I feel our goals align, or I can see kind of what you're trying to achieve here, and I'd like to come alongside you in that as much as I can. So if you're playing sort of a longer term campaign, you can kind of try and work it out that way as well. But yeah, again, that's down to creativity of yourself and with you and the DM, like what would bring you to that place? How can we try and ensure that you're not discovered too soon, and that sort of thing. And I think, yeah, that again, that can be really good. Rebuilding of trust, and there needs to be some meta there at the table, like this player is here for the long term, and we need to ensure that they continue to be accepted at the table, as long as they haven't purposely upset or been out of order above table, or to the point in table where other people weren't having fun. There's a balance there, but yeah, I think so you need to have that meta in that situation, but it's a potentially it could work if it was done right.
Yeah, we had a similar situation in Echoes where Julius handed mainly Flopsy, but the entire party over to some bad people. But I loved, because I think I'd actually said to Andy prior to this point, I think she's after me. I think she might be, but I don't know. And I didn't say anything, because obviously Flopsy wouldn't have even thought that in any way, shape or form. But and then when it happened, we were all like, oh, you traitor. And it was really good fun to kind of like play. And she did well, me specifically, I was like in the middle of a sewer alone with a very, very high leveled and very powerful character. And I was like, how the shit do I get out of this? But like it was fun, and then afterwards, like it led to some really, really good moments where ultimately the character had started off with a goal which actively went against mine, I think, more than anyone else's. But then over the course of the length of time that they'd been with not just me, but with the party, they had basically come to a point where they didn't want to do it, but now they were stuck in a rut, because if they didn't, then it would be a problem. It's that whole trope of, I didn't know you before, but I know you now, and like I like you, and I don't want to do this. So the situation changed, but she had still been actively working in some ways against us, not necessarily to do the thing that eventually ended up happening, but like that had been sort of like brewing under the surface for a while. And that was as a player, that was really good fun. Like I really enjoyed playing that. That was great. It was a really fun scenario to play out, and then obviously the ramifications of that afterwards. Less so actually on my character, because my character had known him for a lot longer, but more so on like Lugus, I think the Ratatosk character in there. Adam played that really nicely, because he'd seen him as like this brother, and then he'd been used and betrayed, and he played that quite nicely as well. So it took a while for, like, I think a good couple sessions for us to kind of get back onto the track that we'd originally been on. So it made for some really interesting RP for everyone involved, not necessarily just the quote unquote evilly aligned character. I think it's important as well to know your party, like the players specifically, not the characters per se, but like know if they would be good with something like that happening. Like especially by, I'm assuming that was sort of midway through a story. Like you'll know how they play, you'll know how they'll react to things, you'll know how they enjoy that sort of plot device and plot point. So if that's something that your party would just be absolutely, no, I don't enjoy this is not good, then I wouldn't do it. But if you know it's going to be something that's going to be, really good fun for them to try and figure out as much as it is for you to play, then I think that's, well, go for it. If you feel comfortable doing that as well as a player, because sometimes, I don't know about you guys, so please do like tell me, but like I struggle doing horrible things in any context. Even in a video game, I'm like, I can't do the bad thing because it makes my honor go down, and therefore I can't do it. So I would really struggle to play this evilly aligned character. I mean, would you guys struggle?
Well, I've played a evil aligned character. Well, he kind of is not necessarily chaotic evil, but more of a he was kind of a dick, and I definitely did struggle with that quite a lot. I think even a few times I brought it up like, hey, if I'm going overboard with this, please just tell me above the table. I don't know. In a way, I feel I was very excited to play that character. Because it was interesting to play it from another side, especially with other people being actually good on light, and where he was more, he was the only person that was able to heal. They found someone that was wounded, and he just went, no, we got the information, we got what we wanted, let's just go, whereas they actually wanted to help. I found it very interesting to be able to play that, but I did feel bad about it, because that's not the type of person that I am. So it was fun, but I did feel a bit bad and guilty about it.
Yeah.
I think psychologically, like we generally like to think of ourselves as good people on the whole, and I think that it's easier for us to play a good character with flaws who can maybe get some sort of redemption than it is to just play a character who's just evilly aligned. Now, actually, if you're creative with it, you can have good characters that are edgelords, don't want to talk to anybody, and they can be really difficult to play opposite sometimes because you don't get anything from them, and it doesn't matter if they're like the most holy paladin that's ever walked the face of Faerun. It can be difficult, but you could be an evil character who's charming, like Lucius, who's charming, who seems, they don't necessarily murder people for the sake of murdering people. They don't fireball the inn for the sake of fireballing the inn. And actually sometimes evil aligned actions can look like good actions. Like, it just depends on the goal that you're aiming for and what's going to get you there. But I think, I do struggle because it's difficult for me to want to think like an evil person. Although I don't think that in the context of D&D or any other tabletop RPG, evil necessarily has to mean, kind of what the Tolkien definition of black and white, night and day. But I think it's something that maybe now I'm a bit more confident with the game and role playing. Maybe it's something I'd like to try, maybe something I'd like to explore and actually think a bit deeper about who is this evil aligned character. And I think as well, maybe we see redemption as turning good or coming good out of a situation. Actually, I don't, that's not actually necessarily how the world works, how these things work. And so I think it can be really rewarding to explore an evil aligned character who isn't going to find the kind of redemption that turns them good necessarily. And I think, if you do it right, playing an evil aligned character doesn't necessarily have to be difficult for the rest of the party or for yourself. But the line of it's what my character would do, that can apply just as well to good aligned characters who are doing inherently stupid things, and that can be just as annoying.
Yeah, absolutely. I did a Christmas one shot about a week ago, and one of the players wanted to steal a load of money from a temple, and had this whole plan. And then one of the other players was like, I don't want to do that. I think that's going to go bad. I don't want to do that. And so they actually didn't do the bad thing because that's what their character would do. Like, their character would be terrified of, there's only so many steely actions and sneaky things that they could do. Like, when it came to robbing from a god, they were like, no, I'm good. I don't want to do that. And that is equally that can be equally frustrating actually for the more chaotic person, because we had a plan. And so it's not necessarily just the evil person in quotes, that is the problem. It could also be, it's not so much, if you play it good enough, it's actually more the conflict between, like, the frustration that a good person feels and the anger that a good person feels because their evil counterpart is doing something heinous, as much as the evil person that is doing something pragmatic because it's the quickest way to save their skins or what have you, and the good person actively is trying to make it more complex and complicated because that it might not be the easiest path, but it's the right path. That can be just as frustrating for I'll say evilly aligned, but not necessarily evil, but just more like, pragmatic and austere kind of character would potentially, like, that would be frustrating. Like, well, we've got a really easy out. Why aren't you just taking the easy out? And it's like, no, because that's wrong. And that can be just as frustrating and infuriating for someone that just wants to escape, as it is for someone who is absolutely appalled by the actions of someone murdering someone or what have you. So it's if you play it well enough, it can be an infuriating, like, tennis match between two very, very complex and interesting characters. But then you've, as I say, leading back to, like, the original point we were making, like, it's important to have that dialogue open, Particularly as well if you're finding yourself like coming to loggerheads with one specific individual in the party. I think it's quite important that you do have that open dialogue with them, just to make sure that like above the table it's not seeping into player dynamics as well as character dynamics.
Yeah, I do think that is very important, and yeah, whilst what you described can be very it can be seen as very frustrating, possibly, but I think it would be more you try and keep those frustrations in the for those characters, because you know that evil character would be frustrated with the good character, whereas the good character would be frustrated with the evil person. But I also think it opens up to interesting moments where that frustration, you know, let them have a bit of a scuffle for to get their opinions out. Like, you know what? No, I want to do this. This is the quickest way we get out of here. Whereas the other person wants to do the right thing. Let them have a bit of scuffle about it. I think that opens up for interesting moments.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we have a similar situation with like Crit Role Campaign 4 at the moment. Like a demon is like learning how to be a good person through Sam Riegel's character, you know. And she has done some, like, I wouldn't say necessarily evil things, but she's definitely done some things that you're there going, oh, okay. And it's not necessarily how a good aligned person would behave. But they've got this lovely dynamic where he's like trying to teach her the way. And she is genuinely trying to be a better person, but like her kind of like natural tendencies like tend to come out a little bit more. And that is a really lovely dynamic that those two have got going on. And obviously they've had a conversation about what their relationship is and what their aims are and things, because without giving too much away about like each of their own characters, they obviously need to have an understanding of occasionally I'm going to do some shit that you're not going to appreciate, and you need to have a think about how your character would potentially react to that and how my character would react to that admonishment.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, well, they obviously did have those conversations before, and again, they're able to then react to those things that their character that they're playing in that moment doesn't necessarily like what that other character does, but they can play in on that because they had those conversations.
Yeah, I think if you're going to play a character that you kind of know is opposably aligned to probably what most of the party is and potentially what the party goal is, then you just need to be creative. And I think that's the case with it. You know, you can have people who make a good aligned character, but they hate all tieflings because a tiefling one punch killed their father or something in their backstory. Well, that's not helpful, because then you've just entirely, you know, I hate tieflings. If I see a tiefling, I'm going to knock it out and kill it. Well, then what happens if you've got a player who wants to be a tiefling? What happens if you come across NPCs who are tieflings? You're just going to derail the entire thing. So I think that you need to be more creative with whatever you do. You can certainly have a hatred for a particular thing or species or a particular magic school or something like that, but you have to use a certain amount of meta there. But I think that you need to be especially creative if you're playing an evil aligned character in that. Like perhaps, for example, it is just a case of I'm evil and I'm saving the world because as much as I'm evil, I still live in this world and I would quite like to continue doing so on my own terms. So yeah, if I have to party up with this bunch of goody two-shoes paladins and clerics and what have you, then so be it. I'll do it to save the world from the mind flayers. That's all good.
In a very short sort of like, I think it was a 2-shot. I want to say it was a 2-shot, a 3-shot. I can't remember. But Andy and I played sort of like this kind of father-daughter dynamic, where it turned out that I had done something incredibly bad by accident to his daughter. I'd killed her a few years prior, and when he found out, because I had been actively keeping that from him, when he found out, at the end of one of the sessions. Or I nearly died. I nearly died, and I knew that was going to happen. And I went into this like I'd spoken to Jack as the DM, and like we'd concocted this plan, and so I knew when this comes out, I'm gonna be on the floor unconscious within seconds. But it was because of the actions of the rest of the party that I survived. And then I think something happened that basically like took priority over the initial anger that a father would feel, and it was that kind of practicality that came out, and then ultimately it was then going to continue if we'd survived at the end of that little mini campaign. We didn't, so we'll never find out. However, it was a really, that was a hard scene to like to act out. I guess that was the closest thing we were doing. We were acting out at this point, and that was difficult. It was great, but it was so hard. And we've actually spoken about it since then as well. That can't have been much more than about 6 months ago, and we still talk about it today. And like, oh yeah, that was great. I wanted to murder your goddamn guts, but it was fantastic. And and that kind of thing can also be really useful. So I think the main thing that I sort of take from characters, whether it's because they're keeping secrets or whether because they're being dicks or whether it's because they genuinely are evil, you've got to think about whether or not that conflict serves a purpose, whether it's a narrative purpose, whether it's a character purpose. Is that conflict actually allowing something to develop, or is that conflict just causing conflict for conflict's sake? At which point, then I wouldn't say it's particularly good. If you could remove that conflict and nothing changes, then what's the point?
Yeah, it needs to have a purpose to have that conflict. Without a purpose, it's just nothing at all, and then it's just I think if it does end up in just being nothing, then that's just going to cause frustrations.
Yeah, I think if you can look back on something like that when you're retelling the story, you're smiling, and it's because it was great. It was entertaining, it was engaging, it was creative, it was a great moment. It's when you tell the horror stories and you kind of roll your eyes or pull a face that, this character's been an arsehole to me, and made me feel bad about playing the game, made me question if I want to even carry on playing this character. Those are the times where it's not worked. So yeah, you need to get that balance. And I think if you're in a situation where you're going to have to say the line, "It's what my character would do," then perhaps you need to preface that with, "I'm sorry, but this is what my character would do for X reason," or, "I feel like this," or even if it's before or after. But yeah, I don't think "it's what my character would do" should just be a throwaway line that's an excuse. It's a free pass to just upset everybody else at the table for no good reason.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a. There are so many horror stories, and you see them all the time, all over Reddit, all over the commented channels on YouTube, like all of those. If there is a toxic player or there is a character within the narrative that is causing strife for no real reason that at least we can see, generally the phrase "it's what my character would do" comes up constantly. And it shouldn't be a free pass to just be an arsehole. Like, it shouldn't be. It should be something that, I mean, at the very least, is backed up by evidence, that is backed up by like historical actions. If your character, but this is the other problem as well. Yes, it might be what your character would do, but if it's also the same thing that what your character would have done 5 months ago and nothing has changed, then there's a problem, because you're not accepting character growth. You are just stubbornly staying the same, and eventually people, regardless of how good they are going to get pissy, because you are actively isolating yourself from that group of people. and you are misaligning yourself with their goals, or at the very least the methods in which those goals are achieved, and there is eventually going to come a point where they will say no, like either get good, literally, or leave, because you are not currently helping us. We are more involved in our internal conflict right now than we are with the actual main conflict, the main quest. Like, you have caused so many side quests that this is an insane amount of time that we have spent on this, and we need to focus on that. That is the ultimate goal. And if you're causing us to have to constantly stop and have a go at you, then that ultimately is not going to save Barovia or Faerun or Waterdeep or whatever it is that you're saving. And so any heroic party. I mean, you see it all the time in like some of the really rubbish like Marvel films, and the good ones as well. Like the where someone has done something that is actively going against their decisions or the group dynamic, and so they have a go at them, and that either leads to a fracture or it leads to character growth that ultimately brings them all together at the end. And that's what it should be. I mean, Civil War wouldn't have happened if all the parties agreed. That is ultimately an entire film made up of PvP. That is ultimately what that is. And because those two characters had two completely different ideas as to where they were going and how they were getting there. But then at the same time, what was it? The second one with Sokovia, with the metal robot. But like that one, Ruffalo and Banner and Stark like create this thing, and everyone's like, "The fuck why did you not tell us this? Like, this was something that we kind of needed to know. Now and then there's a massive infighting that ultimately is solved by the end of the film, and that is the point, is that it's not necessarily consistent problems, but it's a problem that occurs that you then develop from that. Like, there's got to be something coming from it, because otherwise it's pointless.
Yeah, but that's like I said, it's important that it leads to something, because again, if it doesn't lead anywhere or doesn't cause any growth or doesn't have a payoff, then why have it at all?
Exactly.
And again, I think in a way it's also you need to be aware of with which players you are at the table that you are doing this story with, because that's also often going to determine whether something like that actually comes to a conclusion or comes to a payoff. Because if you just have people who are going to not do anything with the conflict, then obviously it's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to be frustrating. Whereas if it's with the right people and with the right intention behind it, then even something that's a bit more stupid may actually lead to something.
Yeah, it was interesting because, like, going back to the guy that was like actively putting me into like some kind of philosophical and existential crisis every week, the DM did actually have a couple of chats with him, apparently. And he said that the reason he felt comfortable doing that with my character is because he knew I wasn't going to take it personally. And I wasn't taking it personally, and that was fine. That wasn't an issue. What I was having a problem with was that, narratively speaking, I wasn't able to enact anything from it. Like, I wasn't able to do anything. He wasn't learning from his experience. I wasn't really learning from the experience as a character. As a player, I'm like, yes, I actively love these kind of conflicted moments where I can like have a go at someone and vice versa, like come at me. But if I don't feel like it is leading anywhere, or if I'm not able to do anything with that stimulus, then why you're just, at this point, you're just aggravating me for aggravating me's sake, and that's not fun.
Yeah, I think, trying to pitch in on that, it's because they also just, every time you did try and do something with that conflict, every time you did try and RP with that person, if they're then just going to say, my character just walks away, then again, that's kind of also depending on the player, because a player that would like to RP that would have, instead of it being a frustrating situation for you in the end, I think having that moment where you could RP and actually do something with it, instead of it being frustrating, I think it would have been a very interesting thing to do.
Oh, hugely. I would have loved it because I mean the character I was playing at the time was like very, very interested in morality and what was good and what was bad, keeping this kind of balance going on. And so actually this would have been a very good conversation for them to be having. Particularly as well because they were from like a different plane of existence. And so getting into the mind of a mortal and trying to figure out why he was doing what he was doing would have been a really, really interesting like character moment for them as much as him. But because every single time I tried to initiate that conversation and this person just wasn't comfortable, like the player wasn't comfortable with roleplay, it meant that I wasn't able to go anywhere. And that's fine, because obviously you're not going to always necessarily be comfortable with roleplay. And so this was the problem that I was having, because I couldn't initiate it because I knew that it made him uncomfortable. After a couple of sessions, I realized that it was making him uncomfortable. So I would stop. But then the only other way that I could then therefore retaliate as a character to what he was doing was attacking him, which I also didn't want to do. So I ended up being kind of stuck in this pit. I didn't know what to do. And that's therefore why I ended up swapping that character out for another character temporarily, just so that I could have a bit of a relief. It was fun up to a certain point, and then it just became draining. Because I didn't want to cause a fight, but at the same time I wasn't having fun.
And at the end of the day, it's you still play D&D to have fun, and I think for anyone at a D&D table, it's always important that just you try and make it so that everyone involved has at least some joy out of it, or at least have fun in it. And if you can't have that, then then something has gone awfully wrong.
D&D's better than no D&D, right?
No, it's definitely not. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah, I'm going to
Definitely not. Okay. All right. Well, I think we're all out of time for this month on this discussion. Thank you so much to Senna and to Vicky for joining us, and thank you for your thoughts. If you've got any thoughts, please comment on the video below, or please come and join us on the Crit Happens Discord and join the discussion and get involved. Thank you everybody so much, and we'll see you again next month. Everybody wave goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.